The House will attend to a prayer by House Chaplain Reverend Kate Atkinson, Rector of St. Paul's Church in Concord.
I believe we'll be welcoming many of you to St. Paul's next Wednesday, Ash Wednesday. I look forward to that. In the meantime, I know we have a lot of work to do, all of us, so let us pray. O God of inspiration and energy, there are days when we wonder where our strength has gone, when we're not sure we can manage everything we're called upon to do. There are days when we despair of the burdens and responsibility that threaten to overwhelm us. As we set our minds and our hands to the work of these coming weeks, help us to use our time and resources effectively. Bless us with creativity, agile thinking, and a sense of proportion. Help us to seek rest and restoration when our reserves are low. And open our eyes to the many opportunities you give us to support, encourage, and learn from one another as we strive together to serve the people of New Hampshire and to seek the common good. Amen.
Amen. The chair recognizes the member from Manchester, Representative Jean Judy, and the member from Keene, Representative Chris Roberts, who will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. The chair recognizes Leonard Bell of Concord, a teacher at Smith Road Elementary School in Manchester, who will now sing our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, carried
McLaren, Mills, O'Hearn, Harper, Russell, Sterling, Joe Sweeney. The dead, important visits, representatives, Avalon, Elliott, Crawford, D. Simone, Roman, Hess, Hurd, Laberici, Martin, Northern, Carol Roberts, Lopez, Sandwood, Silva, Gregory Smith, Sykes, Terkezia, Van, Weber, Welch. The dead, illness in the family, Representative Marjorie Smith.
These leaves of absence shall be granted unless otherwise ordered by the House. The House will attend to introduction of guests.
Mr. Speaker, please welcome Joshua Geary and Samuel Alisea, students from Merrimack Valley High School. Pages for the day. Mr. Speaker, please welcome Dennis Green, guest of Representatives Whaler, Welch, and Guthrie. Yvonne D. Bailey, guest of Representative Spillane. Stephanie Alisea, daughter of Representative Alisea. And fourth graders from St. Tommy School in Sangerton, guest of Representative Brian Gallagher. They are with us in the gallery today. From the Committee on Criminal Justice and Public Safety, House Bill 492, moved by Representative Hall. From the Committee on Election Law, House Bill 133, moved by Representative Hayes. From the Committee on Health, Human Services, and Elderly Affairs, House Bill 101, moved by Representative Fire. From the Committee on Judiciary, CACR 8, moved by Representative Hall. From the Committee on Judiciary, Bill number HB 246, moved by Representative Hall. From the Committee on Legislative Administration, House Bill 338, moved by Representative Hall. From the Committee on Legislative Administration, House Bill 338, moved by Representative Hall. From the Committee on Legislative Administration, HR 6, removed by Representative Tucker. From the Committee on Legislative Administration, House Resolution 8, moved by Representative Corrigan. From the Committee on Municipal and County Government, House Bill 145, moved by Rep. Porter.
Call your attention to a misprint. House Bill 573 from the Committee on Executive Departments and Administration appears both on the consent calendar and the regular calendar. It was intended to be a consent calendar bill. Unless otherwise ordered by the House, it will be considered with the consent calendar bills, and when it is reached on the regular calendar, we'll skip it. Are there any other bills to be removed from the consent calendar? Representative Flanagan moves that the consent calendar with the relevant amendments as printed in today's House record be adopted. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The consent calendar is adopted. Under the rules of the House Bill 330 is referred to the Committee on Finance, and House Bill 344 is on Ways and Means. We will now attend to the regular calendar. I would remind members of the House that we have fairly long debates today on many bills, and so I would remind you that the best speech is often considered to be the 3-minute speech. And with that, we will attend to the first bill today, House Bill 168. The Committee on Children and Family Law, to which was referred House Bill 168, an act relative to grounds for divorce for persons with minor children. Having considered the same, report the same with the following resolution. Resolved that it is inexpedient to legislate. Representative Cynthia Chase for the committee. Chair recognizes Representative Kargas for the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm here not to speak on the bill, but to read to you the correct blurb. And it says, this bill would not allow irreconcilable differences as a ground for divorce for couples with minor children. The committee felt that the bill was a step backward because it reintroduces the necessity for a determination of fault into the divorce process. It would also raise the cost of divorce to both the divorcing individuals and to the state. Forcing couples to stay married until their youngest child attains majority status could allow for the perpetuation of a stressful living situation, which can have as stressful an impact on the child as going through a parental divorce. The vote was 13-4, and it was inexpedient to legislate. And the blurb was written by Representative Cynthia Chase. Thank you.
Representative Crone is recognized to speak against the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I had not intended to speak this morning, but that did need a response. This bill in no way bans divorce on the basis of irreconcilable differences. All this bill does is says if there are minor children in their home, they cannot have no-fault divorce just because it makes the parents happy. We need to take the children into account with our minor children in the home. This bill doesn't ban divorce in any way whatsoever. All it did was say, if there are minor children in the home, people shouldn't be able to just walk away for any reason or no reason. That's all it did. The blurb was entirely wrong. Thank you very much.
Representative Hall, you're recognized for a question to the speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the blurb in the calendar is different than what the chair of that committee said, can you publish the correct blurb?
Correct. The correct blurb will be published in the permanent journal.
Thank you.
All right. The question is on the adoption of the committee report on House Bill 168. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor of the adoption of the committee report say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. No. The ayes have it. The committee report is adopted. The majority of the Committee on Criminal Justice and Public Safety, to which it was referred, House Bill 245, an act establishing a committee to study state and county departments of corrections. Having considered the same, report the same, with the following resolution. Resolved that it is inexpedient to legislate. Representative Laura C. Pantelakis for the majority of the committee. Are you ready for the question? report the same with the recommendation that the bill ought to pass. Representative Lars C. Pantelakis for the majority of the committee. The chair does recognizes Representative Paul for a motion to recommit.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to move to recommend House Bill 597. While the language is technically correct, it is somewhat confusing, and we have an amendment to correct that confusion. I ask that you recommit that to the committee.
Representative Burt? All right. The question is on the motion to recommit. Are you ready for the question? You're in favor? Excuse me. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The bill is recommitted. Representative Burt is recognized for the question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On House Bill 244, Mr. Speaker, you only listed the Representative Pantelakis for the majority of the committee. There was a minority report, and I just remember the past two speakers always listed those minorities also, so the full House would understand. Is that a procedure, or, I'm just curious on why the minority was not mentioned.
I apologize for the minority. I did not see that on the sheet. There was no one else signed up to speak, and so my eyes did not go further along the page. And I do apologize for that. There was a minority.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All right. The majority of the Committee on Executive Departments and Administration, to which it was referred, House Bill 119, an act establishing the John G. Wynant Memorial Commission. Having considered the same, report the same with the recommendation that the bill ought to pass. Representative Raymond G. Gagnon for the majority of the committee. The minority on the Committee, Executive Departments and Administration, to which it was referred, House Bill 119, being able to agree, having considered the same and being unable to agree with the majority, report with the following resolution. Resolved that it is expedient to legislate. Representative J.R. Hall for the minority of the committee. The bill is on second reading, open to further amendment. The chair recognizes Representative Hall for an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In your seat pockets is floor amendment 2015-0295. Speak to that amendment.
You are recognized to speak to your amendment.
Thank you. When the committee heard the bill, there were one speaker in favor of passing the bill. And during the testimony in the exec session, someone noted that this former Governor Stanley has donated 85 acres into the town, and that would be an appropriate place to put this memorial. So all this amendment does, besides changing, it changes the effective requirements of the committee when they go ahead and sit down and talk about what kind of memorial we're going to have and decide where to put it. The constraint would only be within the park itself. That's different than putting it at the state library across the street, which is where the intended place was to put it. I would like to read my original blurb because it was not in the calendar, printed as I submitted it, and I think this will help clarify. The committee heard from the sponsor in favor of this commission. While the former governor, John Wynant, was the first governor to serve 3 terms, was instrumental in helping out the British during World War II, and he was instrumental in helping get Social Security started. He was described as a liberal Republican of the progressive movement. One commentary noted the national press, including Time magazine, saw Wynant as a possible GOP contender to succeed Roosevelt. But these Republican prospects were doomed after Wynant became the cheerleader for FDR's New Deal. Furthermore, bear with Winston Churchill's daughter, Sarah Churchill, the loss of significant financial resources. He ultimately took his life in November of 1947. Testimony included that the commission was planning to put this statue in front of the lawn at the State Library across the street from the State House. While there have been numerous other governors that have contributed to the state, that have received recognition from the statute, while there have been numerous other governors that have contributed to the state, very few have received the recognition to have the statue so prominently located near the State House. The family did donate 85 acres for a park in the city of Concord, and the minority felt that an amendment specifying the location of the statue would be appropriate. I would ask you to support the amendment to allow that this family to recognize what the former governor did, but to allow them to put it in this prominent park that's located in the town of Concord.
The chair recognizes a member from Salem, Representative Sytek, to speak against the whole floor amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to the floor amendment for a couple of reasons. Probably the most important thing, well, there are several important reasons. As you will hear in subsequent testimony, I expect that the Wine Commission has looked at this for a couple of years, and I think they've got the correct answer. I think they got it right as to the placement of the statue, the memorial. But there's another reason which we should respect also, and that's that this park is not state property. We don't have, that's not fair to me that we have the authority to put it in that park, even if we wanted to. We tend here in this house to respect local control, and I would urge you to continue to respect local control and recognize both the local control aspect and the fact that I believe you will hear very soon why the Commission got their location right. So for those reasons, I urge you to defeat this present amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Does the member yield to a question?
Yes, I do.
Member yields, Representative Shirley, I inquire.
And thank the gentleman from Salem for concluding. Would you believe that the location of the wine park in Concord is in a rural setting, isolated with very limited lighting, and this monument to a great New Hampshire citizen be subject to vandalism? Thank you for the question. I would believe that, but I tried to put it a little bit more delicately.
The question is on the whole floor amendment. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Nay. Nays have it, and the amendment is defeated. The question is on the committee report of ought to pass. Representative Fall, do you still wish to speak? No. Representative Jackman, do you still wish to speak? The question is on the adoption of the committee report. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Nay. The ayes have it. The committee report is adopted. The Committee on Executive Departments and Administration, to which it was referred, House Bill 642, FNL, an act allowing gold and silver as lawful mediums of exchange. Having considered the same, report the same with the following resolution. Resolved that it is inexpedient to legislate. Representative John Sytek for the committee. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Nay. The ayes have it. The consent calendar, and the committee report is adopted. The Committee on Finance, to which it was referred, House Bill 176, FNAL, an act relative to towns affected by the Merrimack River Flood Control Compact and the Connecticut River Flood Control Compact, and taking an appropriation therefore, having considered the same, report the same with the following resolution. Resolved that it is inexpedient to legislate. Representative Peter R. Leishman for the committee. The chair recognizes recognizes Representative from Andover, Representative Bratsky, to speak against the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I understand that there are no minority reports written in the blur, so I will do that right now. 2 years ago, we were told that the state of Massachusetts was in default with New Hampshire for flood control payments. At the time, we understood that Massachusetts had not paid anything since fiscal year 2000. This, however, was not the case. The Commonwealth had been making payments of $196,000 a year fiscal 2000 to fiscal 2008. New Hampshire had agreed to this number at one point in the 1990s, but Massachusetts decided this was going to be the number going forward. New Hampshire made no attempt to correct this, despite the fact that the DRA indicated that it did not reflect actual assessed values of our town properties. While the state did not pursue the matter with Massachusetts, it did make our towns whole for each year until fiscal 2011, recognizing its obligations to our towns. But the state decided to stop this practice for fiscal year 2012 and 2013, arguing that Massachusetts had not paid its share. My co-sponsors and I therefore introduced a bill to urge the Attorney General to go after Massachusetts for the missing payments. The Senate added teeth to our bill and threatened to withdraw $250,000 each year from the Attorney General's budget until this was done. And lo and behold, under the threat of a Supreme Court suit, Massachusetts came up with $1.12 million in January 2014, and the state split this amount of the towns with half going into the general fund and the other half to our towns for fiscal 2012. The two states recently reached another agreement for an additional $658,000 for fiscal year 2013 and 14. The total amount so far paid by Massachusetts totaling more than $3.5 million. The compact commissioners are now negotiating for fiscal year 2015 and future payments. Any settlement coming in for 2015 will go directly to the states. So in closing, our towns have been paid fully each year since the compacts were adopted in the 1950s, except for 2013. I ask that you press the red button and overturn the ITM motion so that another motion can be made. Thank you very much.
The chair recognizes the member from Kentucky, Representative Milet, to speak against the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleagues, both Democrat and Republican, I rise today to urge you to vote no on the IPL of HB 176. Let me explain my reasoning. Until the year 1962, the Merrimack River Basin cities of Concord, Manchester, Nashua, Lowell, Haverhill, North End, Andover, and Lawrence questioned whether or not these communities would be flooded by the melting snows and the rains of the spring. To ease this constant threat, the Merrimack River Flood Compact was developed between New Hampshire and Massachusetts. The purpose of this interstate compact was to provide, quote, an adequate storage capacity for impounding the waters of the Merrimack River and its tributaries to the protection of life and property from floods, end quote. The Army Corps of Engineers constructed a series of dams to control the flow of the water of the Merrimack River. In the construction of these dams, land was taken from 18 communities by eminent domain. Now, these were not just idle or fallow land, but these were communities, these were villages that were flooded by these dams. We have a major dam in Hopkinton, and that was completed in 1962. The villages of West Hopkinton, East Ware, large parts of Henniker, and other parts of small towns were destroyed, bulldozed and razed, and families are relocated as a result of that. The Hopkinton Dam rendered 426 miles along the Kentucky River Basin valueless. However, the compact did agree to compensate these 18 communities annually by providing for the loss of property tax revenue. A joint commission was created to annually assess the property values and then decide what the amount of reimbursement was to be paid by Massachusetts and New Hampshire, with paying both 70% and 30% respectively for their fair share. Now, New Hampshire has been abiding by this terms of this compact since its inception by compensating the 18 communities each year, then seeking reimbursement from Massachusetts for their portion of the cost. Unfortunately, Massachusetts has not always stepped up to fulfill this reimbursement. And to be honest, New Hampshire has not been the best debt collector over the years. So where are we now? Why are we recommending a no vote on this issue for the House? Following the FY 12-13 state budget that saw the affected communities receiving only 30% of the money owed, legislation was passed to commit that New Hampshire fully pay the communities their fair share. You'll recall that this House, in our last session, provided a certain, quote, collection incentive to the Attorney General's office to make Massachusetts pay its fair share by taking a potential $500,000 out of the AG's budget. Now, the result was that a settlement was made with our neighbors in the South and provided us with $3.5 million in the FY 2014. In the last legislative session, a decision was made to use a portion of that settlement to fully compensate the compact to the affected communities. Only the 2013 monies were not paid. These are the funds that are in question right now. On December 5th, 2014, two states did reach a settlement for the 13-14 payment. The settlement was enough to cover the payments due to the 18 communities and make them whole under the compact. Unfortunately, the Finance Committee, by a split vote of 13-9, voted to deny that payment. The split runs counter to the historic payments to these communities. 65 years ago, a commitment was made to these compact communities. These towns had planned their budgets according to the amount due them. Without the payment, the state, once again, will shift the burden to local taxpayers. New Hampshire has a proud tradition of meeting its obligations. In the spirit of fairness and long-term commitment to these 18 towns who gave us property and their attending property taxes to the greater good of the downriver communities, I urge you to overturn the ITL of HB 176 so that another motion can be made. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to take the time to talk about the Merrimack River Flood Compact story. The compact communities gave up much for the benefit of many. It is time to honor the commitment to those 18 communities, and I ask for a roll call vote. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the member from Hopkinton, Representative Luno, to speak against the committee report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This bill is about dumping. As everyone knows, the state has a bad habit to rely on local property taxes to pay its bills. In 2010, the state walked away from its agreement to provide support to municipalities and school districts for a portion of the employer contribution to the New Hampshire retirement system. That burden now falls on the backs of local property taxpayers across the state and comes in at about $80 million a year. In Hopkinton, my town, this has cost taxpayers $2 million so far. Now the state again looks to walk away from its agreement with towns that sacrifice property, really communities, in the name of public safety for all of us. By shirking its responsibility, the cost would not be shared by all of us. When the state doesn't pay these towns for using this land, money each of these towns relies on, it falls on the backs of the property taxpayers from these towns to come up with the money. Piling these costs onto the property tax makes it harder for families already struggling to pay their mortgages to make ends meet. Downshifting is bad enough, but this is a bill about dumping. Dumping costs on the backs of taxpayers in these specific towns. For the sake of fairness, make it clear that the state needs to live up to this agreement, and please vote no on this motion.
The chair recognizes the member from Warner, Representative Carroll, to speak against the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A lot of the points that I was going to cover, Representative Myler has already covered in his address. I just want to say that I represent two of these towns, Salisbury and Webster, and they have counted on these funds just as they counted on the money for 2012 that was first withheld from them but then paid by the state of New Hampshire pursuant to legislation passed in the last legislative session. Having served as a selectman in Warner for 2 terms, I'm very much aware that New Hampshire towns now have restricted budgets as revenue sharing from the state is now minimal. These funds that rightfully belong to the flood-controlled towns do at least something to alleviate local budget problems. Let's do the right thing today for the towns that have lost so much and press the red button to vote against the ITL. Thank you.
The chair recognizes the member from Peterborough, Representative Leishman, to speak for the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning. Members of the House, you've heard a lot of discussion this morning why you should overturn the Finance Committee report. Let me give you some specific facts on why you should support the Finance Committee's decision to ITL this bill. New Hampshire has never shirked its responsibility to pay its share. Never. But what we have done is we've picked up the Massachusetts share to a tune thus far of $3.9 million. What the sponsors have proposed, we are sympathetic to the sponsors, but they would like us to completely fund the Massachusetts portion for FY13. You heard one of the earlier speakers say that we did receive a settlement from Massachusetts for 13 and 14. We in fact did. We have yet to receive that check. That's a surprise, isn't it? The settlement that was agreed on was $658,000. What the legislature did in the last session, we did in fact pay 12, which was $542,000 and change, which leaves a total of, I can find in my notes, $115,000 remaining to compensate for 13. The sponsors asked for the full amount of $542,000. Those of us in the majority of finance did not believe we could find that in our strat budget, and I would urge you to support the majority of the Finance Committee and vote green on the motion of ITL. Thank you.
Member yield to question. Member yields, you may inquire.
Thank you, my good friend from Peterborough. You keep on saying that we've reimbursed the towns for $3.9 million as if Massachusetts hasn't paid anything. And in fact, Massachusetts paid $3.5 million short. I admit it, but it did pay $3.5 million. And it is my understanding that the commissioners are now talking about compensating New Hampshire for 2015 and 16 and further payments in the future. Is that correct?
Not exactly. We have received compensation from Massachusetts, you're absolutely right, but $3.9 million short on what the DRA has determined is the responsible figure to reimburse those communities. So in fact, New Hampshire has paid its total share. We've also picked up the Connecticut share that has been remiss in their payments over in the Connecticut River watershed. There are 5 towns there, I believe. But we are still short $3.9 million, and New Hampshire has made up that shortfall in general fund dollars since 2000.
So you're saying that we really did get...
Remember,
did get money from Massachusetts, but it was short the total amount due to the state of New Hampshire. That New Hampshire compensated the towns by $3.9 million.
Member yields to it. One more follow-up you may inquire.
My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that Massachusetts paid $3.5 million, and yes, New Hampshire paid $3.9 million. That difference of $400,000 may actually be taken care of by the commissioners who are now negotiating for new settlements. That's my understanding of this matter.
Again, the figures that I received from the DRA and the Department of Revenue Administration and our LBA, the Legislative Budget Office, indicates that we are short $3.9 million over and above what Massachusetts has reimbursed us since 2000.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes the member from Hillsborough, Representative Shackett, to speak against the committee report.
I am speaking against the ITL for quite a different reasons in telling. I was there. I grew up in Nashua. In 1936, I was 9 years old. In those days, there was no instantaneous TV, no helicopters flying over flood stations. If you were there, you could go down to the barriers to see what was going on, which I did with my father. You could see the sea of water that was there. You could see houses with floodwater up to the second floor. You see houses floating off their foundations. But what really brought this home to me was my father. My father was a civil engineer. He was drafted or asked after the water receded, after a week or so, to inspect the flooded homes and businesses to make the decision. Could they be rehabilitated or be condemned to be destroyed? Most of them were condemned. This happened all over the Merrimack Valley in the most difficult times of the Great Depression. This bill is about the perpetual sacrifice that those towns made so this catastrophe would never happen again in the Merrimack Valley or elsewhere. So remember this when you vote. Thank you.
The chair recognizes the final speaker, member from Hudson, Representative Linover, to speak for the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, colleagues. In the 1950s, Chapter 484 was established, which contains the compact controlling the flood compacts. There's one in Connecticut and the one we're discussing this morning. To change that state law requires congressional approval because the money went to the feds. Something I didn't know until I started digging into this last year. There are 3 Massachusetts commissioners and 3 New Hampshire commissioners. What do you think happens when New Hampshire wants $1 million and Massachusetts wants to pay $100,000? You can see the problem. In the biennium for 2012 and 2013, the state was in the middle of an economic recession. We were struggling to find money to pay for our vulnerable citizens. Rightly or wrongly, we suspended payments to these towns, and they got no funding. We did, as you heard previously, instruct the AG to start working on settlements because Massachusetts had stopped paying. Last biennium, we got a settlement for 2009 through 2012, and you've already heard that finally is the year that we, this body, voted to suspend in our budget, when we did our budget for that biennium, that we have not yet received payment for. Finance typically ITLs money bills in a budget year and brings amendments to House Bill 1 and 2 when they belong. That is appropriate here because we have not yet received the money. We do expect to receive the money in the spring so that we will be taking care of this obligation. As a result, we have asked you to ITL House Bill 176 and work with us on the amendment that will come to the floor with HB 1 and HB 2 when we have received the money. Thank you.
Representative Myler has requested a roll call on this vote. Is that sufficiently seconded? It is sufficiently seconded. This will be a roll call vote. Members, please take your seats. Members are reminded to please turn on the voting station. House will come to order. The chair recognizes Representative Bratsky for parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If you believe, like I believe, in the quaint notion of a promise made is a promise kept, and if you know, like I know, that our flood-controlled towns have borne much sacrifice for our state, and if you know that both parties have pledged to stop downshifting costs to the towns, and if you also know that Massachusetts has paid an additional $658,000 for flood control payments, and if you know that 2013 is the only year that the state failed to make our towns whole in the entire history of the compacts, do now vote no on this ITL motion by pressing the red button. So that another motion can be made. Thank you very much.
The question is on the adoption of the committee report on House Bill 176. If you are in favor, you will press the green button. If you are opposed, you will press the red button. The chair recognizes Representative Linover for parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If you know, as I know, that we did suspend payments for 2012 and 2013, and if you know, as I know, that when we had a settlement for 2012, we dispersed that to the town. And if you know, as I know, that we just have a settlement, but we have not yet received the money, but we do have plans to disperse it in the budget when the money comes, would you please press the green button and support the ITL? Thank you.
The question is on the committee report on House Bill 176. This is a roll call vote. If you are in favor, you will press the green button. If you are opposed, you will press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds.
Keep that going, oh yeah.
The House will attend to the state of the vote. There having been 221 votes in the affirmative, 127 in the negative, the committee report is adopted. The majority of the Committee on Judiciary, to which it was referred, House Bill 194, an act providing life begins at conception, having considered the same, report the same in the following resolution. Resolved that it is inexpedient to legislate. Representative Claire A. Roulard for the majority of the committee. The minority of the committee, having considered the same, being unable to agree with the majority, report with the recommendation that the bill ought to pass. Representative Kurt F. Welper for the committee. The chair recognizes the member from Rochester, Representative Welper, to speak against the committee report.
Mr. Speaker, over 200 years ago, our forebears created the first country in human history.
The member will please suspend. The House will be in order. The member has a right to be heard. If you wish to have a conversation, please take it to the anteroom. The member may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, over 200 years ago, our forebears created the first country in human history based on the foundation of human rights. They built a government with the sole purpose of protecting the rights the Creator gives every person: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. 150 years ago, our country fought the Civil War to extend those rights for the millions of Americans who had been defined as less than a person. 100 years ago, we again expanded the scope of human rights to another huge group of people by recognizing women's rights and extending all of the rights to women that they had been denied for our entire history. 50 years ago, we recognized how far short we had come in extending basic civil rights to minorities and blacks. And we reformed our government, we reformed our educational systems with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. 40 years ago, the Supreme Court of the United States, because the word person was undefined in our Constitution and in our law, because that word was undefined, the Supreme Court of the United States said we could deny basic human rights to the preborn. The Life Begins at Conception Act cures that deficiency in our law and continues our historic mission of guaranteeing basic human rights to all people. I urge everyone to join me in this essential climax of our civil rights history by voting no on the committee recommendation of IGL.
Chair recognizes the member from Dunbar, Representative Cole, to speak against the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House. When the Supreme Court ruled in Roe v. Wade, even in the majority opinion, they made it clear that members of the judiciary at that time considered life beginning at conception to be a reasonable understanding and belief. Although the Supreme Court ruled in that, they interpret law. It's the legislative bodies that actually make the law. And that is why this bill is here before you. In that majority opinion, they made it clear that the state legislatures could decide some of these things. So with that, I would ask that you would overturn the IPL and support the law council. Thank you.
Will the member yield to a question? The member will yield. Representative Nottingham, you may inquire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you believe that if you pick up any embryology textbook, yes, doctors, please go do this, you will find that these textbooks teach that a new, unique human being, not potential for life, but an actual life, begins at the moment of fertilization, the moment the sperm meets the egg.
Thank you, Representative. And yes, I would believe that life begins at conception. I would believe that at the moment of fertilization, there is in fact another person who's there. And our Constitution should protect those.
The chair recognizes the member from Nashua, Representative Murataki, to speak. Oh, excuse me. You yield to another further question? Yes, I do. Representative, so you may inquire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to the member from Bow for taking my question. Would you agree with me that when we're discussing the issue of life, personhood, that life is a fact and not an opinion? And the moment we allow it to be an opinion, we open the door to evil and Holocaust.
Thank you for your question. And yes, I do believe that. I believe that we as a legislature have the responsibility and arguably the obligation to define life beginning and conception. We already define in our statutes what the end of life is. We just don't define what the beginning of life is. Thank you.
The chair now recognizes the member from Nashua, Representative Murataki, to speak against the committee report.
Thank you, Speaker Jasper, honorable members of the New Hampshire House. I'm Representative Murataki, Hillsborough 32, representing Nashville's 5th Ward. I support HB 194, an act providing that life begins at conception. In the Roe decision made 42 years ago, the court compromised in its decision as to when life begins and who is to be defined as a person with full rights under the Constitution. It chose to define the rights of the fetus as emerging when it reaches the stage of viability, when it can survive outside the womb. The author of the majority opinion, Justice Blackmun, wrote, "The court need not resolve the difficult question of when life begins, when those trained in the respective fields of medicine, philosophy, and theology are unable to arrive at any consensus. The judiciary at this point in the development of man's knowledge is not in a position to speculate as to the answer. In making this decision, the court made personhood subject to change, particularly as science has moved the time of viability further back in the past 4 decades. It also admits that while the court may not determine when life begins, it remains the prerogative of the legislature, particularly state legislatures, to do so." Now, I'm also a Roman Catholic and a member of the Viscount's Carmelite Order, and I thought I would share this with you. The Roman Catholic Catechism states, "Human life must be respected and protected, absolutely, from the moment of conception. From the first moment of his existence, a human being must be recognized as having the rights of a person, among which is the inviolable right that every innocent being to life." That's what paragraph 2270 of the Catholic Catechism. Pope St. John Paul II challenged us in his papal encyclical, Evangelium Vitae, as legislators. Work to ensure that the laws and institutions of the state in no way violate the right to life from conception to natural death, but rather protect and promote it. I urge this House to vote nay on HB 194 in expedient to legislate, so that a different motion may be made. And Mr. Speaker, at this time, I will take no questions.
Thank you. The chair recognizes the member from Rochester, Representative Lehman, to speak against the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm here today to talk about an answer to the question, when does human life begin? I'm not here to talk from a religious standpoint or an emotional standpoint. Rather, one that is based upon science and medicine. Human life, Mr. Speaker, is a process. It has a definite ending and a definite beginning. We know that human life ends at the moment when a person dies. No measurable life signs, no heartbeat, no brain waves. That is clear, and any doctor will usually declare a person deceased at that point. So the question then evolves, when does it begin? Mr. Speaker, I would suggest that human life begins at the moment of conception, and here is my rationale behind it. Surgeons will perform prenatal surgery 2 months, 3 months, even sometimes 4 months before a baby is due to be born. Surgeons do not operate on non-living beings. They operate on human beings. And I think that's a very significant point. They know, the surgeons do, that life begins long before the moment of birth. There is one point, however, without which human life cannot continue. That is the point of conception. Sperm fertilizes the egg. Excuse me. When sperm fertilizes the egg, the cells divide 1 to 2, 2 to 4, and so on. The process of human life begins. By the time a woman takes and passes a maternity test, the new human being has DNA, the oxyribonucleic acid. That DNA will be the same for the rest of that being's life, whether the being is going to live for 10 years or 110 years, it doesn't matter. So my point is that human life must begin, the process must begin at conception. And that is why I am standing here today to ask you to vote to overturn the committee recommendation and recognize that human life begins at this time. I'll take any questions.
Chair recognizes the member from Amherst, Representative Rowe, to speak in favor of the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like you all to know that I wholly agree with all those who were opposed to the report. But that's my personal opinion. I believe in the sanctity of life from conception up to and including abolishing the death penalty. But that's my personal opinion. I'm not standing here as a person. I'm standing here as a representative of government. And I have taken an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States and New Hampshire. And Roe v. Wade is the law of the land. And this totally, and if there is a constitutional provision, we're allowed to regulate it. We can pass abolishing late-term abortion. We can do anything like that. But we cannot pass a law that is totally contrary to the Constitution. And this is abolishing abortion. So, as a person, I'm sorry, but I'm going to be voting for the committee. As a representative, I'm delighted that I'm voting for the committee.
The chair recognizes the member from Merrimack, Representative Moore, to speak against the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. For us to even have this conversation, question to sanctity of preborn life concerns me. With all the great minds in the world of science today, we can't even come to the conclusion of when life begins. I believe it was defined a long time ago. Moral law is the Creator's declaration of what is absolutely right and absolutely wrong, and it supersedes man-made law. The courts of the Nuremberg trials, which were held between 1945 and 1946, not the same as law. Legislation must be moral to be lawful. And government actions that violate moral laws are criminal. Whenever the government threatens to initiate or put force against innocent people, it violates the moral law, no matter what the legislative law may say. German law at the time of World War II made it legal to consider Jews as non-persons, therefore giving the Germans the legal right, not moral right, to commit such heinous crimes against the Jews. Germans' written law subverted moral law in order to carry out their egregious actions, which we know today as the Holocaust. Make no mistake, our written laws in America today are subverting the moral laws, and as a result are taking away basic human rights. Supporting that life begins at conception merely reinforces what the Creator has already established for life. And for this reason, I urge you to support this bill and stand for those who have not yet had the right to live. Please join me on voting no on ITL and yes on OTP. Thank you. I will not yield to any questions, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The chair recognizes the final speaker, the member from Goffstown, Representative Roulard, to speak in favor of the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can you hear me? I was really nervous before I came up here, but since half the seats are empty, I'm only half as nervous. I'm here because of what we were asked to do, and that is pass laws that are good laws for all of New Hampshire, not just Goffstown, but all of New Hampshire. The majority of the Judiciary Committee determined this bill to be inexpedient to legislate. That was a bipartisan vote. I'm here to tell you that my reason is not because of the pro-life or the pro-choice folks in this room. My vote is because of the Constitution. Is this law constitutional? My blurb is perhaps one of the longest blurbs you've had to read, but it tells you my thought on that. We cannot, as Chairman Rose says, violate the law of the land, whether we like it or not. More importantly, if we take a look at this law, or this bill, that they would like to have a law, it's vague, it doesn't tell us anything, it doesn't have you or me or anybody else explain to our neighbors what this law means, who must abide by it, who will be prosecuted by it. It doesn't tell us any of that. It has unintended consequences. The unintended consequences was my gig when I was trying to get up here. What are the laws going to do? I want to know what the unintended consequences are. And do you know what this will do? It will prevent life from coming into this world. It would prevent individuals from having in vitro fertilization, which is the egg and the sperm coming together for fertilization. Because those mice, if they are frozen, to use a lay term, life will be lost in that process. That means physicians could be held responsible for destroying an embryo. We can't have that and yet still have the constitutional rights of the individuals and the families that want to bring life to this world. Lastly, to all of my fiscally conservative friends out there, this law will increase the taxes of the state in litigation costs. This is a bill on the road to litigation. I'm going to tell you why. Only three, and I was wrong in the committee hearings to say true. There are 3 laws similar to this that life begins at conception or fertilization in this country. They are Missouri, Kansas, and Louisiana. Each and every law states, and these are now laws, that the law is only in effect if and when the U.S. Supreme Court determines differently. If Roe versus Wade is overturned or reversed, then the law takes place. Two of them say in the law that their law is subject to the U.S. Constitution and subject to the reversal in any decision interpreting that Constitution. I'm here about that. I'm here about the Constitution. I'm not here about pro-life. I'm not here about pro-choice. I'm here about passing laws that are good for the citizens of this state of New Hampshire. We cannot pass a law that is unconstitutional, vague on its face, has unintended consequences, and is going to cost this state millions to defend it. And because I think we've heard just about enough, I will yield to any questions. Thank you.
Representative Camarillo has requested a roll call. Is that sufficiently seconded? It is sufficiently seconded. Members, please take their seats. House will come to order. The question is on the committee report on House Bill 194. The chair recognizes Representative Groen for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if you agree with this quote from one of my favorite authors, David, son of Jesse, who wrote this: "You made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it. You watched me as I was being formed in utter seclusion, as I was woven together."
Will the member please suspend? The member was recognized for a parliamentary inquiry. Please state your question.
Sorry, I think I said if you agree with me, or did I not say that?
It's not if I agree, it's a question in the form of a question, which is not to me as to whether I agree. It would be if you know or if you believe.
If you believe, as I believe, that David, son of Jesse, was correct when he wrote these words under the inspiration of God: "You made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me..."
Will the member please suspend? The member is engaging in reading his speech. You need to ask succinct questions, not to quote long verses.
If you agree with the question that King David would ask, did you not make all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb? And further, will I not thank you for making me so wonderfully complex, because your workmanship is so marvelous?
Will the member please suspend? Parliamentary inquiries are not about quoting anyone else or anything else. You need to make it a succinct question, and that does not include quoting scripture or anything else.
If you believe, like I believe, that King David was correct when he said life begins at conception, would you not press the red button so a further motion can be made? If you also believe, like I believe, that Dr. Ellen Guttmacher was correct, the founder of the Guttmacher Institute, when he said, life begins at fertilization, a human baby is conceived. Would you not push the red button so we can bring forth a better alternative? Thank you.
The question is on the Majority Committee report on House Bill 194. This is a roll call vote. If you are in favor, you'll press the green button. If you're opposed, you will press the red button. The chair recognizes Representative Birch for parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, if I know that HB 194 is unconstitutional based upon clear and unambiguous United States Supreme Court decisions, and if I know that HB 194 would ban certain forms of contraception as well as banning in vitro fertilization, and if I know that despite the language of HB 194, science tells us fertilization is a process, not a moment in time, then would I support the bipartisan majority of the Judiciary Committee by pressing the green button.
The question is on the Majority Committee report on House Bill 194. This is a roll call vote. If you are in favor, you will press the green button. If you are opposed, you'll press the red buttons. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds. Have all members voted who were here when the question was put? The House will attend to the state of the vote. There having been 246 votes in the affirmative, 104 votes in the negative, the committee report is adopted. The majority of the Committee on Judiciary, to which it was referred, House Bill 269, an act allowing a landlord to collect first. I can hold on for that. Apparently, we're having a slight technical problem. Please bear with us. Majority of the Committee on Judiciary, to which it was referred, House Bill 269, an act allowing a landlord to collect first and last month's rent in addition to a security deposit. Having considered the same, report the same with the following resolution. Resolved that it is inexpedient to legislate Representative Linda B. Kennison for the majority of the committee. The minority of the committee, having considered the same and being unable to agree with the majority, report with the recommendation that the bill ought to pass. Representative Kurt F. Welper for the minority of the committee. The chair recognizes the member from Belmont, Representative Sylvia, to speak against the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill allows landlords, in addition to the first month's rent and a security deposit, allows the landlord to collect the last month's rent when they lease an apartment. Remember the word allows. It does not require the landlord to collect the last month's rent. It allows it. Now, landlords are not immune to the laws of economics, so they can't just, of their own volition, collect the last month's rent. The market will decide that in large part. Why this is a good bill and the committee report should be overturned is because there are sometimes people that have not the best references, but perhaps they've changed their situation and have the money available to put forward that last month's rent, which could be the incentive that makes the difference in them getting the apartment or not. So this is good for tenants. The other side of this, and one of the reasons that landlords would like to collect that last month's rent when they rent an apartment, is because sometimes people decide that the security deposit, is actually useful for their last month's rent, and they don't pay it. This causes losses for landlords. This causes all rents to be increased. It's very simple, it's very basic economics. Those who oppose this bill primarily are in town welfare departments, and they're concerned that this is going to increase the monies that they're going to need to get people into base level apartments. I don't think that concern is particularly valid, and it does increase those rents for the people that are at the bottom of the rental market. There are other parts of the landlord-tenant codes that actually allow quarterly payments of rents. So it's easy to work around this also, but it's a bit disingenuous and it's more cumbersome. We're adding regulations to the landlords, to businesses, and as a Republican, I ran on a pro-business stance. This bill is pro-business. This Republican House should not be voting inexpedient to legislate a bill that is pro-business. It's also important to remember that in the end, the rents are not increased. It's just paid ahead of time, which leaves that tenant with the money for their next apartment when they move, or possibly a down payment on a house if they're really moving up in the world and actually buying their first home. That money is then available at the end of their term. So please overturn the committee recommendation and press the red button. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the member from Concord, Representative Kennison, to speak in favor of the committee report.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Kennison, Merrimack County, District 15, and I'm here to speak to the judiciary majority, which voted this bill inexpedient to legislate. This bill, as already stated, would allow a landlord to collect the first and last month's rent in addition to a security deposit. This is a bad bill. It will increase property taxes and homelessness, both issues in the state of New Hampshire. Under current law, landlords may charge 1 month's rent plus a security deposit up to the amount of one month's rent. This bill would allow landlords to charge the equivalent of 3 months' rent prior to occupancy. The median rental for a modest 2-bedroom apartment is around $1,000. This means prior to occupancy, the proposed tenant would have to come up with $3,000. And I would guess there are members here who would be hard put to come up with $3,000. This presents an extra financial barrier, not only for homeless people to find housing, but also for low and middle class people to find rental housing. The religious community, charities, and nonprofit organizations were unanimous in opposing House Bill 269. If this bill were enacted, it would deplete their already scarce resources targeted for rental assistance, resulting in fewer families being assisted. Local welfare administrators expressed extreme concern about the impact of House Bill 269 on welfare budgets. Towns are mandated by New Hampshire state law to help those in their communities with basic necessities such as housing. For example, the city of Concord expends 90% of their aid budget for rental assistance under the current law. The only funding for local welfare is from property taxes. There is no federal, county, or state funding for this purpose. If House Bill 269 is enacted, it will place an additional burden on all of us who own property, including landlords, as more people will require assistance. The committee also heard from Housing in Action of New Hampshire. Housing Action of New Hampshire is a coalition of over 70 organizations, including financial institutions, developers, property managers, landlords, and service organizations. The purpose of Housing Action is to improve federal and state policies because the cost of housing in New Hampshire has become a major concern that all policymakers should be aware of. The business community is aware of this. That is why affordable workforce housing is a major priority for the Business and Industry Association in New Hampshire. 29% of New Hampshire residents are renters, and this is projected to increase as more and more people are choosing to rent other than buy. Of that 29%, almost half are paying 50% of their income on housing cost. So whatever your primary concern is, New Hampshire's business economy, for providing affordable housing, New Hampshire's middle class, New Hampshire's low-income families, New Hampshire's homeless, the increased cost to localities, increase in our property taxes, and the increased burden on charitable organization. House Bill 269, if enacted, would deal a major blow to New Hampshire's housing market. What we heard from two landlords who testified on this bill was that they would be more apt to lend to people they considered risky tenants. And this, it's unclear how a landlord would decide who was a risky tenant. They talked about a blemish on their past rental, and now I can't remember the second thing, but there was one. You will, if you agree with the majority of the committee as inexpedient to legislate, I would ask you to vote in favor of the majority opinion of the committee.
Would the member yield to questions? Yes. Member does yield. Representative Baldessaro, you may inquire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative, for taking my question. As a former landlord who owned properties down in North Carolina, when somebody was moving out and I didn't get a rent check the last month, I couldn't pay mortgages because many of us landlords don't have deep pockets. How do you protect the landlords to have their freedom to protect their family business by asking for the last month? How do you protect the landlord first?
Currently, under New Hampshire law, landlords have the right to enter into a lease requiring quarterly payments or payments for 2 months. So they do have some protection without adding the burden of last month's rent.
Does the member yield to a further question? Member does yield. Representative Baldessaro, you may
Thank you,
inquire.
Representative, for answering my question. I have some concerns as you made a comment there about property taxes are going to go up. And this is done all around the country and I had to do it myself in North Carolina because I got taken to the cleaners many times and it took too long to go to court. How does our property taxes go up? Because we're asking for first, last, and this is enabling, but how does it go up?
The property taxes go up because of increased homelessness and the responsibility of towns to address the basic needs of folks in their community. Increasing the welfare budget necessarily leads to higher property taxes, and that also will affect the landlord. I'm not aware of all of the states that you discuss as having similar laws. I am aware of Massachusetts, and I'm also aware of, I can find it, the financial burden placed upon the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, where these financial barriers are in place. The new governor has asked for $404.6 million for housing and homelessness for 2015. This includes a $44.2 million increase for emergency assistance, $167.3 million to expand
Would the member please suspend? I think you're going off from where the question was, so I think you've sufficiently answered the member's question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thought one of the questions was that this type of legislation has been adopted in many states.
I believe the question was simply how would property taxes go up? I think you sufficiently answered that question. I believe that was the member's only question at this particular time. But would the member yield to a further question?
No. Thank you, Mr.
The member does not yield. This will be a division vote. Members, please take your seats. This will be a division vote. The House will come to order. The question is on the majority report on House Bill 269. The chair recognizes Representative Bowden for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I know that House Bill 269 is as much of a benefit to tenants as it is landlords, and I also know that House Bill 269 will give people with no credit, bad credit, or a poor landlord reference a second chance at obtaining housing, and if I know also that the rental market will determine for landlords whether or not they are able to charge that last month's rent, and I further know that this is enabling legislation and not a mandate, would I then push the red button to overturn the committee report? Thank you.
The question is on the majority committee report on House Bill 269. This is a division vote. If you're in favor, you'll press the green button. If you are opposed, you'll press the red button. The chair recognizes Representative Hopper for a parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, if you know as I do that my wife eventually is going to smarten up and give me the boot, and if you know as I do on my legislative income, it would be really nice if I could afford a place to live. Would you now support the committee recommendation and press the green button?
House will come to order. The question is on the committee report of inexpedient to legislate on House Bill 269. This is a division vote. If you are in favor, you'll press the green button. If you are opposed, you'll press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds. Have all members voted who were here when the question was put? The House will attend to the state of the vote. There having been 187 votes in the affirmative, 167 votes in the negative, the committee report is adopted. The chair's intent is to move forward. We have 4 bills left on the regular calendar and the bills removed from consent. Of those bills, I'm aware that there are going to be motions to recommit 2 of them and table 1 other. And there are very light debates, if any, on the remaining bills. So light to get through so we can get to lunch and not have to come back. So please, when you are speaking, take that into consideration. The majority of the Committee on Legislative Administration, to which it was referred, House Bill 371, an act relative to assessing the consequences of the Citizens United decision. Having considered the same, report the same with the following resolution. Resolved that it is inexpedient to legislate. Representative Jack B. Flanagan for the majority of the committee. The minority of the committee, having considered the same and being unable to agree with the majority report, with the recommendation that the bill ought to pass. Representative Lucy M. Weber for the minority of the committee. The chair recognizes the member from Salem, Representative Elliott, to speak against the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Originally, this controversial bill was about the constitutional meaning of freedom of speech and the fear of political financial corruption. It started in 2002 when Senator McCain and Senator Feingold sponsored the famous Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act. And it had to do with what they called electioneering communication. In that bill, they defined electioneering communication as any broadcast, any cable, any satellite communication that mentions a candidate within 30 to 90 days or 60 days of a general election. Their bill also said that such communications being funded by corporations or unions was unconstitutional. 2 years later, during the Bush presidential campaign 2004, Citizens United, a conservative 501c group, took Michael Moore to court saying that his movie Fahrenheit 9/11 was a severe criticism on George Bush and his response to the 9/11 terrorist attack, that it constituted political advertising. And the case went before the Federal Election Commission that promptly dismissed the suits, and the Citizens United lost their case. In 2007, Citizens United produced their own film called Hillary. And it was a severe criticism of Hillary Clinton, and they tried to get it onto national television. But they were called into court. And in 2008, the district court for the District of Columbia ruled that the movie Hillary, quote, violated the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, and Citizens United lost that case as well. But then they got lucky because they appealed it to the Supreme Court. And on March 28, 2009, the United States Supreme Court reversed that decision and said it is constitutional to make a film critical of any political campaign, president or candidate during any campaign. This was a major victory for free speech, or so everyone thought. Citizens United won that case, or did they? The first part of the ruling of the Supreme Court said, from now on, all corporations, all unions, or any individual will be sheltered and treated just like an individual citizen when it comes to the issue of freedom of speech. From now on, corporations and unions will be treated as a person. Then something went wrong. There was an unintended consequence given by the Supreme Court that day when Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts went on further to conclude that from now on, any citizen of the United States of America could contribute as much money as he wished and keep his name anonymous by donating all of his money to what we now call super PACs. Now, this bill today has nothing to do with the rightness or the wrongness of that decision. Listen to me. This bill today has to do with offering a solution to a possible consequence of that decision and help to avoid further political corruption. Now, the majority would have us believe that this is a perceived problem. In fact, if you read the blurb, you'll see that the phrase occurs not once, but 3 times, as if to accent the belief that political corruption does not even exist. I think it does. And I think it has had a strange effect on the citizens and the voters all across America, because they no longer have an interest in politics that they once had, because they feel they have no longer got an effect on much of the income, and they have strong opinions even though they're not able to express them. Deep, deep down, this bill today, this bill, 371, is about the silent majority, as Nixon used to say. Those thousands of people in New Hampshire and those millions of people in the United States of America have lost their voice. This bill today is really about the common man. This bill today is about thousands and thousands of voters from all over our country who feel that they are not only shut out from any major decision process, but who also feel that their politicians have lost touch with the common man, who works for minimum wages sometimes, who struggles every day just to make ends meet. And as many a stranger has said to me, quote, I don't like politicians anymore because they don't care about me. And they don't care about my family. They're all a bunch of crooks anyway. The only thing they care about is the next election. Unquote. Now, the legislative committee is thinking just the opposite of what this bill intends to do. They feel that they do not need to hear the voices of the people on this issue. And this is how they think. They might be saying to themselves, and many of you too, the people have voted for me to represent them, so I don't need their input. Well, if that's true, why are we having all these public meetings this month in order for us to hear the public and get their input before we vote in executive session? This bill does the same thing. Only the public hearing is not limited to 10 or 20 people, it's limited to thousands of people all over the state of New Hampshire. All this bill does really is it makes it possible for two committees, one from the House and one from the Senate, to go to 4 different sections of our beloved state, north, east, south, and west, whatever, and listen to the voice of the people. To take that feedback, to refine it, to condense it if necessary, and put it into more simple language, how the voters of New Hampshire feel about one of the most controversial issues in America today, namely the corruption of our entire political system. What could be fairer than that? Isn't this what we do on every public hearing? Remember this. It is only if we take steps 1 and 2 in this bill, sending them out, the committee, that step 3 even becomes possible. It may be that at the end of their investigation, the group may come to the conclusion that the legislative committee was correct. This is not really an issue. It's only a perceived problem. On the other hand, if the committee of reps and senators hear a roar of discontent, if they hear a cacophony of disagreement, if they hear angry voices by thousands, and then, and only then, will they be motivated to contact our representatives in Washington and make some reasonable suggestions arrived at by both parties. This cannot be achieved by one party. This has to be a bipartisan effort. If we do not at least attempt to do this, you and I both know that the common man will still retain his right to freedom of speech. That's not the issue. But it will be a much quieter voice because he will have lost his political influence because of his limited financial resources. And we will all lose our ability as common men and women to be able to pick our own candidates here in New Hampshire and throughout America. Not because of the influence of wealthy people. I'm not opposed to that. We can accept that as our political way of life already. It's been with us a long time. We'll always have it. We always will. But what we cannot compete with is the growing, corrupting influence and recent emergence of an entirely new group of powerful politicians. We call them the 1%. The 1% who control 90% of America's resources. We call them billionaires. Billionaires. One of the fastest growing groups in our country. Let me conclude by asking you this. Just let the public know that we in New Hampshire, we in this session, we will listen to you on this highly controversial issue. We haven't forgotten you. That we realize that this is not a perceived problem. This is a real problem. We, like them, will know that this is one of the biggest issues of our time. Maybe not by some in the New Hampshire session, but certainly by millions and millions of Americans all over our country. Ordinary, common, hard-working people who live their lives from paycheck to paycheck, paying the rent or paying the mortgage on their house or paying the latest car payment. We call that the middle class. And you and I are the middle class. And we don't contribute millions to our political candidates. Below our level of income are the poor. And the poor have no voice at all. Let's give them a voice today, now. Push the red button. Thank you.
The chair recognizes the member from Dover, Representative Bixby, to speak against the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, fellow representatives. The representative from Salem has touched on a number of problems the Citizens United decision The representative from Salem has touched on a number of the problems with the Citizens United decision that can only be addressed by amending the U.S. Constitution. Here, I will focus on who or what is entitled to constitutional rights. As the Roberts Court asserted, corporations have rights equivalent to the natural-born humans, or do those rights protected by our democracy pertain to individual humans? The Declaration of Independence gives us a clear indication. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. We can look again to Thomas Jefferson for his assessment of the role of corporations in government in a letter from 1816. I hope that we can take warning from the example of England and crush in its birth the aristocracy of our moneyed corporations, which dare already to challenge our government to a trial of strength and to bid defiance to the laws of their country. But we do not live in the time of Jefferson. The corporations of which he was so suspicious have become an everyday part of our life. Why should we cling to his notions about them? Perhaps we should ask what distinguishes a corporation from a person in such a way that corporations should not be granted natural rights. A corporation is fundamentally guided by a mission statement, and adherence to the principles of that statement is often required by law. In most such statements, the primary requirement is to strive to return profit to investors. Last term, we did give New Hampshire corporations permission to consider social goals as well, but that is far from being required. Individual human beings have no such legal bonds on their goals and ideals. Most are guided to some extent by self-interest, but are strongly influenced by loyalty to their communities, charity towards their fellow persons, and ideals and morals that promote the general welfare. In short, corporations have mission statements, individual human beings have consciences. Granting the rights of citizens to corporate entities corrupts the ideal of natural rights that is at the core of our democracy. Natural rights belong to individual human beings. We need to amend the Constitution to make this uncontrovertibly clear. For New Hampshire, the first step is passing HB 371 so our natural-born citizens can help us craft an amendment and send it to Washington with our congressional delegation. Please overturn the ITL so we can return the rights of the people to natural-born people. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the member from Wolfboro, Representative Stephen Schmidt, to speak in favor of the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable colleagues, I rise today in support of the committee recommendation of inexpedient to legislate. House Bill 371 assumes from the beginning that the Supreme Court has made several wrong decisions with respect to campaign finance. That issue alone is one of considerable debate and one that will undoubtedly continue. The majority of the committee believe that the inferences reported in this bill are without merit to begin with. The question that we should ask ourselves is, should the New Hampshire legislature really be in the business of having public hearings across the state to discuss a Supreme Court decision? Have we done that for any other federal court decisions? How many of our own major pieces of legislation receive the same treatment? We might do a road show from time to time for legislative matters that have a large state impact, like the state budget, but that process is only to gain input on things that we as legislators have oversight on or are responsible for. This bill even requires that the House and Senate committees to submit draft language to the U.S. Constitution on how to fix this perceived problem. Additionally, the bill calls on the congressional delegation to act on this perceived problem by working towards a constitutional amendment. Now, I'm not necessarily advocating for one, but maybe a more apt approach would be a constitutional convention to address whatever perceived issues may exist. Fellow legislators, if you happen to agree with the spirit of this bill, that money in politics is a bad thing, that's your prerogative. But this bill does not solve or address that issue. This bill will enable a publicity campaign for those who disagree with the Supreme Court Citizens United decision. And the majority of the Legislative Administration Committee didn't believe that is the proper role of the legislature. For the aforementioned reasons, I urge you to support the committee recommendation of inexpedient to legislate and press the green button. Mr. Speaker, in the interest of saving time, I will not take any questions.
Roll call has been requested on this, and it is sufficiently seconded. This will be a roll call vote. Will members please take their seats? It was requested by Representative Rosenwald. Will members please take their seats? The House will come to order. The question is on the Majority Committee report of inexpedient to legislate on House Bill 371. The chair recognizes Representative Rosenwald for parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I believe that people in New Hampshire are concerned about the influence of money on politics, and if I want to learn what the public thinks about the Citizens United decision, and if I also believe our congressional delegation should have access to this report, would I now press the red button to vote no on the motion of ITL?
The question is on the committee report on House Bill 371. If you are in favor, you'll press the green button. If you are opposed, you'll press the red button. The chair recognizes Representative Chandler for parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Even if I believe the Supreme Court was wrong on this issue, but I also believe this bill does not provide the proper or appropriate mechanism to properly address the issue, and I also believe that it is not the best or appropriate use of members' time running around the state holding public hearings, and I know that any group of citizens can cobble together appropriate language and happily submit it to our congressional delegation for their review and submittal or whatever they wish to do. But I now support the majority of the committee report of inexpedient to legislate by pressing the green button.
The question is on the Majority Committee report on House Bill 371. This is a roll call vote. If you are in favor, you will press the green button. If you are opposed, you'll press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds. Have all members voted who were present when the question was put? The House will attend to the state of the vote. There having been 194 votes in the affirmative and 157 in the negative, the committee report is adopted. Chair recognizes Representative Dan McGuire for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Even though I disagreed with it, I recognize a really fine speech when I hear it, and I would like to move that the remarks from the gentleman from Salem on House Bill 371 be printed in the Permanent Journal.
Motion is on the question to print the remarks of Representative Elliott in the Permanent Journal. Are you ready for the question? Division vote has been requested. This will be a division vote. Are you ready for the question? No. Clearing the machines. This is a division vote. If you are in favor of printing the remarks in the Permanent Journal, you will press the green button. If you are opposed, you'll press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds. If all members voted who were present when the question was put, the House will attend to the state of the vote. The House will be in order. There having been 178 votes in the affirmative, 173 votes in the negative, the question passes, and the remarks will be printed in the permanent journal. Hope springs eternal. However, the last two debates dragged on a lot longer than were anticipated. We will be breaking for lunch. We also have a motion we have now two announcements. What I was going to say was we have a motion for reconsideration on a previous bill. So we have more work to do. So please stay in your seats for lunchtime announcements. Chair recognizes Representative Schuett for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a reminder for the members of Environment and Agriculture and the members of the Merrimack County delegation that we have our luncheon presented by the Farm Bureau in the State House Annex. That's just across Capitol Street. You can even go through the tunnel. Good food, and you can learn about the state of farming families in our county. See you all over there.
Chair recognizes Representative Stephen Smith for a lunchtime announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As soon as we recess for lunch, the Transportation Committee will meet in LOB Room 203 briefly to exec House Bill 395 relative to electronic toll collection.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Representative Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Commerce Democrats, please meet in the LOB 302 in 15 minutes for a short caucus. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Flanagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For the people that weren't here at caucus or didn't read the calendar, the Republicans are invited to a free lunch at Tandy's, courtesy of the New Hampshire GOP.
Chair recognizes the clerk.
Mr. Speaker, under House Rule 486F, Representative Kirk, Chairman of the Committee on Finance, has declined the reference of House Bill 330 as a second committee.
So noted. You have the House will be in recess. Representative Katowski, recognized for an announcement.
Thank you. Health and Human Services Committee will meet 15 minutes after the close of this session to exec two bills, House Bill 670 and House Bill 671. They're early bills. Please join me there. Thank you.
House will stand in recess until 1:20.